This is More Than Before with Nathan Cook.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another great show. We have a great guest today who has an awesome heart for the fatherless, specifically fatherless boys. And he is doing some incredible work with his nonprofit, which we're going to learn about a little bit later on today. He has been a dad to 18, that's 18 kids. And he has landed a 125-pound tarpon in his life, which is, I think that's pretty fantastic. And he truly has a huge heart for young boys, for teaching them how to grow, how to be respectful, how to show up in life and be contributors in society. So I absolutely love that. He has a nonprofit that is actually getting ready and hopefully to launch into its fifth state here in the United States. So I want to welcome my good friend, my buddy, Chad Wallin to the program. How you do today, brother?
Good, man. Good to see you. It's been a bit.
It's good to see you. It's funny because we've spent a lot of time together, and yet I think it's been probably 2 or 3 years since we've actually had a chance to really talk. So I'm excited to dive into what's going on in your world, but also to learn a little bit more of the backstory of getting there. But before we kind of jump into the backstory piece, how about you let everyone know a little bit more about the nonprofit that you've built and kind of what you guys are doing right now, because you guys truly have an incredible impact here in the U.S.
So we launched in 2018. We got our nonprofit status November of 18. So we're about to hit our 5-year mark. Actually, about here any day, we'll be hitting our 5-year mark of running our nonprofit LLC. First launched camp was January 26th of 2019. And been running hard ever since. We specifically serve fatherless young men. So I know you said boys a couple times. At camp itself, we refer to them as young men, and for an intentional reason. We can go into that later. But we work with fatherless young men, and what that means to us is between 6th and 12th grade, and they don't have a dad living in the home. So some of them still have biological fathers. They're just disengaged or not around, or there's not a big speaking piece into their life, and that's where we come in.
And I love that because not only do you come in and do kind of the mentoring piece of, I would almost say like the mental, the spiritual, like, what a father does and the teaching aspect of things, but you also come in and you do more of the physical teaching too of teaching them how to do things. In fact, I was blessed to be at a couple of advanced camps with you. Here in Oregon, and to see what you guys do and like actually making these young men work and do things like, I at one point, we took them fishing. I remember that was a fun time, and not many of them had actually really been fishing. You took them out and you were showing them gun safety at one point, building things, changing oil in cars. I remember one specific one, which I thought was a little bit crazy personally, but you took them to a Ford blacksmith. Oh yeah. And you have these kids running around with, they weren't running around. They were actually pretty good. But, you have these hot irons and you're teaching them about metal work, which is so incredible. I don't think most even young men actually get to do that in their life. And so you're creating these opportunities for young men to not only just have, a strong father role model in their life, but also actually teaching them things that could actually benefit them later on in life, right?
Correct. And actually, it's funny you brought that one up specifically because that's a pretty close one to my heart as blacksmithing. Growing up, that was one thing that my dad never taught me, and it was one of the things I wanted to be taught growing up. My dad had seasons of being disengaged a lot of our lives. 27 years he worked at a lumber mill, and he was just not around in the evenings and in the mornings. So my mom was the parental figure that we had. And so blacksmithing was one of the ones I always wanted to learn. Never got taught that. And so that was one of the first ones we implemented. It was actually our first ever camp that Advanced Camp ever did out of just north of Fort Worth. Because we brought blacksmithing into it, we've actually brought farriers into the picture. If people don't know what a farrier is, they're commonly known as a horseshoer. And blacksmithing is how they do it. They take a piece of steel bar and they turn it into a horseshoe that's fit specifically for that for that hoof, and for whatever activity that they're doing. And I know that sounds funny, but there's running shoes, just like people. We got running shoes, we got lifting shoes, we got jumping shoes, we got sprinting shoes, we got long distance shoes, we have work boots. Like they're literally all the stuff the same as with the farrier. And from that, we had these farriers come out and teach blacksmithing with the side information of what it looked like to be a farrier. And right now, actually, I have a young man that is training under a farrier in Weatherford, Texas. He's about a year and a half into his training, his internship. And the cool part about it is he's a paid intern. He's getting taught the trade. He's being discipled. And at the end of 2 to 3 years of working with this guy, he's looking at about $120,000 a year job.
Wow.
And he's coming out of a below poverty level living environment prior to learning this trade. And so somebody throws out something fun like blacksmithing to understand that you can actually move into a 6-figure job from blacksmithing into becoming a farrier. So we open their eyes to things like that. What's some possibilities, what's some opportunities for you that they never would have come across otherwise, you know?
I love that kind of you talk about this piece of your childhood, and I'm curious, kind of wanting to dive into that a little bit more. You know, you were saying that your mom was kind of the figure at home that kind of really made you who you were, but you know, you also have your dad that was there, disengaged though. What was childhood life like for you? Like, did you have siblings? Were you the oldest? Were you the youngest? What was life growing up like for you?
Grew up in Oregon.
You grew up in
I grew
Oregon.
up in Oregon.
Okay.
Yeah, just in Dallas, not the Dalles, but Dallas outside of Salem. I wasn't the oldest, I wasn't the youngest, but I was the coolest. Can I say that?
Which makes sense.
Hopefully my brother and sister hear this. No, I was a middle child. I have an older brother, younger sister. Yeah, like I said, my dad worked for a lumber mill, a plywood mill actually. And he worked, 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon until 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. So when we got home on the school bus, my mom was there to get us off the school bus. And when we got up in the morning to get ready for school, my mom was the one that got us ready for school and off to the school bus. And so, yeah, it was my mom that was really the disciplinary, the supporter, the teacher, the corrector, all those pieces. And my dad was around on the weekends. If it wasn't hunting or fishing season, he was around. So he did teach us some manly things that we do pass on to advanced camp. But I also understand that there's some things that I didn't get taught that I had to learn on my own growing up because he wasn't around. So.
Yeah. How did that play as you got older, in your adolescence, like as middle school, high school? How did that kind of affect identity as you kind of went through high school? Like I think we kind of wrestle with that a little bit when we go into our younger years. We're kind of trying to figure out, I think a lot of kids still today, obviously, are going through a lot of questioning of like, well, who am I? Who am I created to be? What should I be doing with my life? What was that period of life like for you?
So my younger years, I didn't realize that it was much of a struggle, to be honest. It really didn't hit me until my mid to late 20s to realize, man, what am I like? What is this supposed to look like? What does a dad look like? What is, not necessarily just a dad. Like I knew, like my view on dad is a little distorted. Just your role as a father and I wrote a book on this, and I actually have some information in the book about the walking through this, but the generational passing. My dad's dad was not a very emotional dude, and his role was to provide for the family. So my dad adopted that thought. And so my role as a dad, this is my dad saying this, my role as a dad is to financially support my family, be there for them financially, do whatever I have to do to make sure that they have food on the table. But words of affirmation was not a thing for him. If I heard that my dad loved me, I heard it from my mom telling me that my dad loved me. I wasn't until 19 years old until my dad told me for the first time I remember of him saying, I love you. And I was I was 39 the first time I remember my dad telling me he was proud of me. And so those words of affirmation, they didn't affect me until I started being serious about, okay, what does it look like to be a dad? What does it look like to have kids? What does it look like to be a good husband, a godly leader in the household? Of saying, oh, I have no idea. Like, now who do I go to? And so, I've been kind of lucky that I've had some friends, dads that were pretty good about speaking into my life. And then I also, I think this is where a lot of people fail, or I shouldn't say fail, but fall short, is they say, oh, I don't know how to do it. oh, well.
Mm.
I looked at it and said, I don't know how to do it. Where do I learn this from? And so I looked at men that I watched and said, man, I love how he parents. I love how he's a husband. I love how he's a leader. I'm going to glean things off of them. And what can I do to make myself better? Who do I need to spend time around to be able to be informed and equipped as I feel like I need to be as a dad, as a husband, as a leader, both in life and in the church faith-based environment, right? So
Yeah.
I had to hunt him down, man. I didn't play the pity party and kick rocks with my head down and hands in my pocket. I said, okay, now, where do I need to find this from? And so I went out and sought it out.
I love that you talk about environment. We can't always choose the environment that we're in, but we can choose the people that we decide to follow.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of a big thing. And from the years that I've known you, you've always surrounded yourself with people that were bigger than you. Not necessarily better, but they're bigger in areas that you want to develop.
Are you calling me short? Is that what you're doing?
That's exactly what I'm trying to do. No. for those of you that are listening. Yeah, well, it's for those of you listening on podcasts, he looks very short. No, just kidding.
No.
Well, but it is interesting though, because a lot of people, like what you said, they fall into this rut of, well, I don't know how to do it, so I guess I'm just never going to do it. And so they go off and they just live life without actually trying to learn something. And so I'm curious, where did that come from? Was that something that was just kind of developed in you that you said, you know what, I'm curious, I want to learn about this? Or was there someone that put their arm around you and said, hey, like if you want to get better at something, you got to go seek out knowledge. You got to go find people that are doing what you want to do. Was there someone that poured that into you, or was that something that came about in a different way?
It definitely wasn't somebody that poured it into me, unfortunately. It was me seeing that there was a shortfall and wanting to be better. I know not everybody thinks that way. That's part of the reason we do what we do. Is some of these young men don't know that they need men speaking into their lives until they get men speaking in their lives, and like, I need more of that. So I luckily saw it and said, man, something's got to change, and I made those steps to do those changes. Once I got to the point of, okay, I've seen a difference here. I saw that, and then I saw the effects of seeking somebody out that could speak into my life, seeing the positive impacts of that, and then being intentional with those guys and saying, hey, man, I'm falling short. Like, here's some areas I need to work on. Can you help me with these? And then that's where you can kind of get like some mentorship happening. You can get some direction happening that's very intentional versus just paying attention to what's going on around you. So, and that, then you can be intentional with your time.
I think there's also there's kind of a gifting that I think you have, is being able to see these young men where they are and seeing their gifts and their talents and saying, hey, let's expand upon those. Let's get better at those. And there is a desire to learn in specific aspects, or a desire to want to become better in certain things. Like, not every boy is like, hey, I want to go and play, sports. Some boys, they want to go and they want to do something more like recreational, of like fishing, and something that uses, fine tactile pieces or art or whatever it is. Some boys, as you and I have seen, they'd rather go and they'd read books. They'd rather read books for an entire weekend instead of going out and, hanging out with some of the other guys. Now, you challenge that in some aspects, but you also recognize that and you pour into that. How has that been impactful in your life for the gifts and talents that you've had? Has there been someone in your life that saw specific giftings and poured into those giftings, whether that was your mom or a mentor or anything like that?
Man, I wish I could say that there was. Once again, I think it was self-motivated. I've kind of lived in this theory, and I'll give a little bit to Andrew Zimmern, just a little bit. I believe he made a comment one time on his Bizarre Food shows, like, you miss out on a lot of stuff if you don't try things. Like, you could miss out on your favorite food if you didn't try something new. And so I kind of live in this place of I'll try anything once. And, and I apply that to food all the time to learn culture, but I apply that into activity. I did a high ropes zipline course, and I'm afraid of heights. I was on the top shaking. I'm being looked up at, not sometimes physically, right? Because I'm 40 feet off the ground, but I'm being looked up at by these young men and saying, that's our leader. like, why isn't he not doing this? And so getting up there, I found out that it was true. I still don't like heights, but you know,
you didn't grow a new fondness for heights from, you know, being forced. So paragliding and parachuting is not the next thing for you.
So I don't know if that would be different. Everybody tells me that, you know, skydiving is different than, you know, like bungee jumping or doing like a high ropes course. It just feels different. So I don't know. Maybe we'll still do that. But
you're not being pushed off a platform. You're being pushed out of a plane. I mean,
exactly. Yeah. Jumping out of a perfectly good plane. You know, but I did learn that I love the zip line part of it. And I love the camaraderie and the conversation post that's so important. And so I do try to do new things. I try to keep an open mind. Like we teach a ton of different topics. I had somebody throw out to me. We just did this one in Texas about 3 months ago. They said, can we do guitar restoration, repair, tuning? And then I'm going to teach playing at the end. I said, never even thought about that before. Sure, let's do it. And so we did it, and it turned out awesome. Like the guys are super engaged. Every single one of our campers, we got guitars donated, used guitars. We asked for no new. We didn't want new guitars. I said, I want used guitars. We got enough donated and enough amps donated that all of our campers took a guitar, an amp, and a cord home, so that everything they learned how to work on this guitar, they could take it home and they got to play it at home. You know, and so it's like this, you know, you brought it up, like all the stuff we do. We throw a really, really big net because you got the bookworm that may not be into doing blacksmithing, but you put them into an intellectual place of learning how to wire a guitar and look at schematics, and all of a sudden they're like, boom, that's what I needed. And so that's why we do so many things, is because you don't know what is going to click with you, what's going to be like, man, this is my wheelhouse. We have a few campers that are higher functioning autism, and we were doing electrical one time, and this young man was working with our electrician. He was actually a certified teacher and everything. Come to find out, is really cool. And he's doing it, and he leans over to the teacher and goes, I've always wanted to do electrical. He goes, man, this is awesome. Then what's next? And it like just opens up the doors to go into a place of education. He's like, I always wanted to do it, but now that I'm doing it, I know I want to do this. You know, and this is just speaking from experience, not from a place of like book knowledge, but the young men that I've worked with high functioning autism, their level of intelligence and their level of focus when they find what they want to do is so intense. This guy was so focused on electrical and understanding how it all worked that as soon as he figured out that's what he wanted to do, man, the doors just like his confidence blew open, his knowledge, like the seeking of knowledge blew open. He's like, man, I'm ready to go. So it's just really neat that when you throw this really big net, try out all these different things that may or may not be comfortable with it. It can open up some doors that they never would have even known were there.
You know, it's crazy how far you guys have come within the organization, and even just kind of how far you've come personally. And I love kind of this concept that you were describing earlier of, you know, you don't shy away from, oh, I don't know this. You just dive 100% into this, right? Like, you know, you graduated with a business degree. And I'm curious, when you got out, right? Because you graduated with a business degree from, you're looking at me strange.
No,
You went to school for business though, didn't you?
I did. Yeah. So business was my major and psychology was my minor. And I came up to a really weird crossroads in life where it was either buy groceries or pay for school tuition. And, I felt that filling my belly was, at that time, was more important than filling my head, unfortunately. And so I went down a path of trades, and that's probably why I have a little bit of a heart for trades over 4-year college degrees. And I'm not saying there's no need for college degrees. There's some career paths and stuff that you can't do without. Like, I don't need a doctor working on me that doesn't have a doctorate degree in medicine, right? But I don't need an electrician with a degree in general studies. Like I need them to be a tradesman. Like I don't need them burning down my house because they know how to do marketing. Like that just doesn't make sense. So there's like understanding that there's a place, time and a place. And so I went down a road of trades. I support trades very much. A trades-based focus with what we do, but we do encourage guys that want to do 4-year college degrees of how to get them lined up for success in there too. But yeah, no degree on this guy. Thanks for pointing that out, Nathan. No,
Well, I was going to edit that out until now you just said that. So now it's going to stay in there.
yeah,
we're
it's fine,
we're going
man.
to make you look like an Oregonian
Yeah,
hillbilly hick.
yeah.
No.
I took my overalls off today for the show. I still left my plaid on for you though. Okay.
I appreciate you putting your tooth, your false tooth back in too.
Yeah, you can almost not tell it is there. Yeah.
Almost. Well, one of the things I love about you though, Chad, is you truly do have this desire to learn and really a love for learning.
Mm-hmm.
You find interest in things and you see an opportunity and you go and you dive into it. Like when I first met you, you were working at Comcast. You were working as an account manager for businesses. And even before that, you were working for enterprise. And so you kind of stepped into sales. But if I remember correctly, when we were first talking about you entering into that industry, into a sales industry, you didn't know anything about sales at that time, right? Like
Yeah, just
that was
my
a whole new world
experiences.
for you.
Yeah, just my experience with the enterprise. I was with them for 12 years, and they did have us do some like networking / meeting with businesses to create enterprise as their primary car provider for travel. But yeah, otherwise no like actual training. And it was at some points was drinking through a fire hose.
Well, I remember you talking about the difference between you and a lot of newer salespeople is you will just go and knock on doors. That's one of the things that is, I think, a key characteristic about you is you step out and you just go to try and find someone to help, to work
Mm-hmm.
with. And I think that's been a huge contributor to your success, even with Advanced Camp, because
Mm-hmm.
you started going to the people that you knew, people in different industries, people that could offer things, whether that was from detailing or, how to detail a car, or, how do you use a forge, or how do you, do electrical, or fill in the blank.
Yeah.
You went and you sought out expertise to bring into the camp, which I think
Yep.
is really spectacular. And I think it goes to this idea of you value learning, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
so I'm curious, where does that desire for growth come from? Where does that desire to learn come from?
I think it goes back to like the whole premise of you never know what you really like unless you try it. And so there's this constant craving. Actually, before we even jumped on the call, I was doing some research on different processes and procedures to cook or smoke okra. And my neighbor's mom grew a bunch of okra, and she said, "You guys want some?" I said, "Oh, heck yeah, I love okra." I get it from her, and I said, "How do I cook it?" She goes, "I don't know. I mean, we've always like just broiled it." So I'm like, "There's got to be a way to do this on my Traeger." And so it's like there's this constant thing of like, how can I do this? How can I do it better? How can I do it to impact more people? Like when I cook, I hardly ever cook for myself. My neighbors, they smell the smoke or they know it's time to come over. Like, I'm always trying to, I think the moment in life where you are content with yourself, I think that's showing it. I think that's a problem. I think that's that complacency and then contentment. I was like, man, I honestly, I struggle with it. Like people are like, nah, I'm good. Like I'm okay hitting status quo. And because status, man, we could do a whole nother podcast on that, but I just struggle with if I'm sitting in the same place for the rest of my life, like what's the value in that? Like why can't I be a little bit better tomorrow? Why can't I be a little bit more knowledgeable the next day? Why can't I impact somebody that really needs something the day after? Like why does it have to just sit here? And maybe that's part of my problem of why I don't sit still much. Cause I always feel like there's something that could be done, right? There's something I could learn. There's somebody I could impact in a positive way, that it's just constant learning. How do I do better? How do I get better? How do I learn more? I've been listening to some really cool leadership podcasts just because I'm in a role now of having 40, 50, 60 mentors across the nation of how do I manage that many people in 4 different states, kind of a 5th state with Georgia, possibly a 6th state in Las Vegas, in Nevada. It's like, okay, like how can I manage as a one-man show over that many people? Well, I got to learn. I got to get better. I got to glean information off of people that are already doing something similar. And so I think there's just this constant push to learn a little bit more.
Well, it kind of reminds me, I don't know if you remember kind of the older leadership models, but like the older leadership models when I was growing up was always the pyramid leader, right?
Mm-hmm.
You got the leader at the top, and then you have all the minions on the bottom, and all the minions are supporting the leader. But really, leadership is actually that inverted pyramid. It's the leader on the bottom, and then as that leader grows and develops, they can support more and more people. And I think that's one of the
Mm-hmm.
things that I've loved about your journey is like even when you first started going into this world of nonprofits. I remember you saying, I know nothing about nonprofits. I don't even know. I know how to take kids out. I know how to teach them and to give them the tools that they need to be successful, but I don't know anything about a nonprofit stuff. And then all of a sudden I hear you like, oh yeah, I'm launching a nonprofit. We're moving forward. Like in your study and you're doing these things,
Mm-hmm.
and you find that there are solutions going through the learning, going through the development process. And you say, well, if I want to get here, then I need to actually go out and I need to go and learn. I need to get
Mm-hmm.
these traits. I need to do these things. But one of the things I really love about you is this community aspect that you have about you, Chad, because one of the things that you do is you build community around you, and then
Mm-hmm.
you equip the community to be a part of it. How has the community aspect of life really played into who you are today? Because you really do gather people around you to build community around you.
Man, I wish I had a real good explanation for that. I think part of it's just my character. You know me. We used to. That's how we met. Was at a networking event, networking get together, and I've had this asked to me all the time of, man, how do you know so many people? How do you network with so many people? And I say, I literally live in a place of who do you know? And
Mm.
there's two pieces to it. And I think this is where the community comes from. Is you before you try to take stuff from other people, you offer stuff to other people. I think that's where community gets built from. There's a single moms ministry in Tennessee that I'm trying to work with, and I literally just texted or emailed one of the leaders there today, and I said, hey, how can we help serve your single moms? Like, this is what we do. This is how we do it. How do we serve you guys? How can we be a resource instead of coming in and saying, hey, you know what? This is what we do. This is what I need from you. Hey, church. This is common with churches too. Like, you come into a church and I get a wall put up. So if there's any church leadership listening to this podcast, understand, if I ever knock on your door, I am not coming down there for something. I'm coming there to serve. How can we be a resource for your church to come beside what you guys are already doing? And so I think that's where that community gets built from, is because people know I'm not coming to get, I'm coming to give, whether it be of my time, my resources, my connections. I run a nonprofit. I'm not coming to give financially. So, but I got time, I got time and some talents, and I do have some resources, if you want to consider that as treasures, that I can come in beside and say, hey, what can we do to help you serve your people better? Man, I think about that, like the people that come with their hand up versus their hand out. I just feel genuinely those are the ones people come around. They're like, man, that's
Mm.
rad. I want to be around the people that are like willing to be, part of a giving group, I guess. So I think that's where it kind of comes from.
Yeah. How important is sacrifice in kind of pursuing these different aspects? Like you have these goals, you have these huge dreams for advanced camp. And we'll get to that in a little bit about, what is the ultimate goal of advanced camp. But I am curious about the sacrifice piece, because a lot of people can see your social media feed and they see, the giving of people. Like I've seen like amazing cars given to the organization to be able to wheel kids here and there, and wraps and not wraps like what you eat, but like wrapping
Yeah.
around the car, like really really cool thing. Like even from the guitars to the chords to the amps, like there's such an amazing opportunity for people to get involved and to give to organization. But I think a lot of there's a lot of people that don't understand the sacrifice that it takes to get to even where it is today. Because I remember you saying, hey, I'm going to start doing this advanced camp thing full time. I don't know how it's going to work out. And then like a few months later, you're like, hey, by the way, we're selling our house. And I was like, wait, what? Yeah, we're selling our house and we're moving. I was like, well, where are you moving to? You're like, well, I think we're going to end up in Texas, but we're buying an RV and we're just going to drive. And I was like, wait, what are you talking about? Like you have a job, you have a family, you've got some beautiful little girls, and I think you had at least one or two dogs at that point. I'm going, you're going to pack everyone up, you're going to sell everything, and you're going to go on the road, and you're going to find a place to do this. Like, dude, there's some insanity / like sacrifice going on right here. Can you talk about the sacrifices that you've had to make along the way in order to get to where you are right now?
They honestly, most of the time, may sound funny, but most of the time they don't feel a lot like sacrifices. I hear that from other people. It's just like fostering. You made the comment earlier, dad to 18 kids. People look at it and they're like, man, how do you sacrifice all that time with your kids? How do you sacrifice your sleep? I mean, honestly, guys, like I'm barely alive right now, like physically alive right now, because we have a 12-week-old baby that woke me up 4 times last night, every hour and a half. So I don't even have like an hour solid of sleep time and time again last night. It was brutal. Like, luckily there's good coffee down the street. They actually, here in Texas, they sell Oregon coffee. They sell Stumptown. How cool is that?
That's funny.
Oh, super cool. Anyhow, that's how I'm surviving right now. That's how my heart's still beating. My blood is half caffeine. And so people look at it and they're like, man, how do you sacrifice that? And I don't look at it as a sacrifice. I look at it as, this is what we're called to do. Like, this is what, man, if everybody looked at their life and said, what about them versus what about me? It doesn't turn into a sacrifice. It turns into a way of life. And so I don't really look at sacrificing a lot. I mean, there's been some times where I've had to sacrifice time with my girls on a Saturday morning instead of going and doing advanced camp. My wife has a doctor's appointment this Thursday, and instead of, I'm having to sacrifice being able to pick up the kids from school and the 2 foster boys from daycare to be coming to Oregon, I'm sacrificing that time to go to Oregon and pick up a car that was donated and go through the DMV process and then go to my grandmother's funeral. So there's things that I sacrifice, but I also look at it in the fact of, man, that's just how you love people, is you shift things. It just becomes a way of life. I bet you if you ask my wife the same question, like, she's a surrogate for the 3rd time. Well, how are you sacrificing your body for that? She goes, I'm not. I'm loving somebody and providing something for somebody that can't do it on their own. Like, I'm providing a family or a first baby for a family that can't have their own child. Like, it's not a sacrifice. It's a way for us to love them. So it's just a different, I guess, just a little bit different perspective on it. We don't just, I guess, I don't ever look at it as a fact of we're sacrificing. We're just loving like God calls us to love.
Well, I really love that, because so many people look at sacrifice as a daunting piece. And, it's almost kind of like, you see someone homeless on the side of the street and you go, well, I'm going to sacrifice my sandwich today. And you like almost envision this pain as you're giving them the sandwich of like, that's my lunch that I'm giving you, kind of thing. But at the end of the day, true sacrifice doesn't have that. True sacrifice is, man, I love this person and I want to give this. And there's no feeling of loss. When you sacrifice and your heart is in the right place, there's not a loss. There's actually a gain. There's actually 100%. A fulfilling that happens when you're sacrificing in the way that you're supposed to sacrifice. I think sometimes if you sacrifice and it's extremely painful, you might not be sacrificing correctly. You might be doing it the wrong way, because maybe you're so attached to what it is that you're giving that maybe you need to reconsider your heart and where your heart is. You mentioned God there a second ago, and I want to kind of go down that route, because I think God has had a huge impact in your life. Your faith has had a huge impact. Tell me a little bit of your faith walk. What has that been like? Have you always been a Christian? Did you start out that way and born and raised? Was that something that came along later on in life? Tell me a little bit about that journey that you've had with that, because that's had a huge impact in your life.
Yeah, I'll give you the abbreviated story because it could be a whole nother podcast again. So if we need more content for later, just invite me back. I was raised in the Catholic Church until I was 15, and I actually stepped away from it because there's me and a guy there just didn't see eye to eye, and we tried to talk it out and decided we're going to agree to disagree. And I went from there I bounced around to churches, just to whatever church my friends were going to, evangelical church, Christian Missionary Alliance Church. They're all non-denominational churches out of the Catholic Church. And actually, the thing is once again, my dad was not involved. My dad was not part of church going. There's no spiritual leadership in the household at all. My mom was there's no male spiritual leadership in the house at all. My mom was the one who took us to church every Sunday. My dad showed up on picture day for the list of all the attendees. Like, they handed out a booklet every year. These are the families. And anyway, so he showed up for picture day. We all had our matching shirts and ties, and then he disappeared until the next one. And so I just didn't have much spiritual leadership. And that's where I had to start gleaning from other men of what does this look like. And so at 15 is when I was at I think it was a Young Life. I'm like 98% sure I was at a Young Life event and accepted Jesus as my Lord and Savior. And then at that point, really I just kind of got on fire. Solid through about 20 years old, moved from Dallas, Oregon to Bend, Oregon. Couldn't find a church. Got married, walked away from the church for about 10 years. Went through a divorce, and I wouldn't say it was a crushing divorce. There's no kids, no house, but as a divorce nonetheless, it was 10 years of my life that were, in a sense, just kind of lost. I was, my buddy walked through, I actually had moved back to Eugene, Oregon at that point, and I had a buddy walk through with me the day after, or the day my ex-wife walked out on me. He came over and he brought his backpack with him to my house. We were just going to have whiskey, have some steaks, hang out, watch a movie. He shows up with his backpack and he goes, I asked him what it was for. And he said, well, we have church tomorrow. So my church closed. Just in case we're watching a movie too late, I don't want to drive home. And I'm just going to leave right from here in the morning. He goes, you want to go with me to church? I said, nah, hard pass, man. I don't want anything to do with that. And by the end of the night, it was just like this nudging on me of like, dude, you need to go. And I showed up and I changed my mind. I went with them. And for about the next 6 months, I couldn't make it through a full sermon without just crying like a baby. Anyway, I started this path of working on myself, just making myself a healthier person, along with, building my relationship back with the Lord. And I remember at one point I was praying about it, and I said, man, why is this like, I feel like you never left. And it wasn't audible, but it might as well have been of like, I didn't leave. I've been here the whole time, and you just didn't recognize the fact I was here. And it hit like a ton of bricks of, man, Lord's been with me this whole time, and I didn't even acknowledge his presence. And it kind of hurt a little bit because of my ignorance, but it took me in this place of like, I hate to make the comparison, but it's like riding a bike. Like, my relationship was like right back on course. And I turned to him and said, all right, Lord, how do I serve you? Like, how do I do this? And that's kind of where it gets a little squirrely. Some different places of ministry, serving, divorce recovery ministry, children's ministry, going overseas and working in Thailand with children being rescued from at risk of being sold into the sex trade. It's where I met my current wife. So I met my wife, and another whole long story with all that. And ever since we got together, we've had this just wild, crazy heart for the fatherless. That's the majority of the kids sold into the sex trade in Thailand, Cambodia, all over the world, is they don't have a father. And realize here in the United States, it's mainly prisons. 75% of prisons are filled with fatherless. 90% of homeless and runaways are fatherless. And so anyhow, I really just completely leaned into it and said, all right, Lord, what do you want? And he just really laid on my heart to mentor, laid on my wife's heart to adopt. And so we started fostering. And man, we've had to lean into that, into our relationship with the Lord even more in fostering, because dude, if you do that on your own, it's brutal. Like, it's like, to understand the heartbreak of a child, of like what you're working with, you have to you have to have the Lord to help you through that, because it's some pretty rough stuff those kids have been through, and they just need some love, some unconditional love, where it's not normally taught anywhere but in the Bible. So, so that's kind of.
I think it's really interesting, just your journey, and I think what's fascinating about you and your wife and the ministry and having a heart for the fatherless is a lot of people would hear, well, a lot of people would say fatherless, or they'd hear fatherless and they'd say, oh, well, let's go fix the fathers, which I think that is an application. Someone needs to be working with fathers to get back involved. And there are plenty of organizations that do that. And then you also look at the women who are in those fatherless situations, whether it's literally the father is gone or whether the father is just absent. You have women and they need organizations to come around them to support them. But what's really interesting is I do not hear a lot of ministries that focus on the kids. Kids who have gone through this. And I think that there is going to be a massive hole in our society because of the children who have grown up without fathers. I think it's a huge hole that we need to address. But we also need to look at those who don't have fathers and say, hey, how can we come around them? How can we lift them up? How can we encourage them? How can we, get them in society, being functional, but also knowing that they're loved, right? Because I think love is a huge thing, a huge component about everything that you do. There is service, there is community, there's learning is a huge piece that you really focus on. But I really think, since I've known you, when I first met you, I was like, oh, he seems like a kind of hard salesy kind of guy. Like, I don't know. And then the more I've gotten to know you, the more I realize how big of a heart you have for the fatherless. The reason he has such a passion and really no fear when asking for things is because he knows he's asking on behalf of someone who does not have a voice, the fatherless that don't have a voice. And so I think it's absolutely amazing what you're doing within your organization. What has been one of the greatest gifts that God has given you to be able to reach out to these kids, to be able to mentor and serve them? What has been one of those giftings that you've received that maybe in the beginning you didn't really feel like it was a gift, but as time has gone on, you've realized it's been a pivotal gift that has truly helped you to connect and to mentor and to teach young boys, young men?
Man, probably one of the best gifts is some of the life experience I've had to walk through. It's really, when I went through my divorce, I used to hate it when people said, man, I know how you feel. Oh, cool. So you've been through divorce? Well, no. Well, then you don't know how I feel. And so I look at, as funny as it sounds, like if I went to walk through divorce, if I wouldn't have had, a dad that, if I would have had a dad that would have been there every night, been there every morning, that played catch with me in the front yard, that showed me how to use a hammer versus just telling me, go hit that nail. It's like if I would have had those things, then I wouldn't be equipped to do what I'm doing now, to be able to, for one, have compassion, and for two, have the patience, like to understand the slow down and to work with these guys. So it sounds funny that something that hurts can be a gift, but it absolutely can be. And so I've actually had this conversation with my mom because, I talk about my dad on podcasts. I wrote this book, all these different things. I've talked about how my dad has fallen short. And my mom's like, man, I really don't like you sharing about that. So sorry, Mom, if you hear this podcast, I just bust rolled you. But she's talked about me not liking me and talk about that. I said, but Mom, you have to understand, if that wasn't the environment I grew up in, and that's not how I experienced Dad, then I wouldn't be able to positively impact all these young men. And like, who would be doing it? So yes, I don't want to talk ill about my dad, but how my dad raised us, or in some situations the lack thereof raised us, has been the biggest gift to push me forward to keep going for these young men. That if I didn't have that, I wouldn't know what they're missing out on. If I had the perfect dad at home, be like, dude, what's your problem? Like, didn't you just have a dad that took you to ice cream on a Thursday afternoon and pulled you out of school? Like, my dad never did that. Like, I wouldn't even know, like, that's not even real. It's not even real life. And so honestly, I think that's been probably the biggest gift I could, some of the just stuff walking through in life, man. It seems like it hurt, but you can use it to be such a benefit to others.
I love what you say about that, because it's true that most people don't understand that your greatest hurts, those greatest maybe downfalls that you feel, are some of the greatest momentum that you can have moving forward into solving problems and helping other people. And, I love what you say, because you do speak, you love your dad, you respect your dad.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you said it really well in the beginning, that your father was taught a very specific way how to raise children. And he used that exact same method with you that your grandfather used with him.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this passing down from generation to generation that we see, that just because the last generation did it doesn't mean it's necessarily the best way to go about doing it. But you truly do go about this in such a way of love and respect, of saying, you know what, these hard times, these difficulties have really shaped me in a way that have helped me to be able to reach out and help so many people. Chad, I truly want to thank you for jumping on the program. It's been so good to have you on, to hear your story, to hear your heart for the fatherless, specifically young men who don't have a father, whether that's they physically don't have a father, or maybe it's an absent father. I know so many people who wish that they had a better relationship with their father. And I think just even hearing this, going out, search for Chad Wallin, go get his book. What's the title of your book, so people can search for that, Chad?
The Broken Identity of a Father.
Awesome. So go and find that. And also, if you're inspired just to be more involved with what Chad's doing with Advanced Camp, you can actually go and see where they're launching. You can donate to their cause. You can go to advancedcampusa.com. And I would highly encourage you to go, whether you want to do a financial gift or whether you want to get involved as maybe a mentor. If you're a man out there and you want to be involved in what they're doing, I would highly recommend you going to the website and checking them out. I do want to ask you one more question here before we kind of wrap up. And it really does center around Advanced Camp, because, when you first start out, you start out with a vision. And I think sometimes our vision can be small, because we see our vision through our own eyes and we go, well, it's only going to be this big. Like, I think maybe when you first started out, Advanced Camp was just going to be Oregon, and it's no longer in Oregon. It's grown past that, Oregon, Texas, Florida, moving into Georgia. Like you're constantly moving and growing and expanding. I'm curious, what is the ultimate vision that you foresee right now for Advanced Camp, and who are you called to be so that you can nurture that to its fullest potential?
Man, actually, that's really cool you asked that question, because I don't think we prepped for that. I'll give you my 8 to 10 year plan, and then I'll give you my infinity plan. So 8 to 10 years, the goal is, I just felt the Lord was telling me that we were supposed to be starting basically a pole barn, that we're going to be teaching trades, life skills, that these young men can come and visit with us the last 1 or 2 periods of high school class day, right after school. I don't know what that's going to look like, but they can start their teaching through that. And then when they graduate high school, they will be able to literally roll right into a career of plumbing or electrical or welding or blacksmithing, and they can roll right into the trade out of high school. And be a few steps ahead. Because I know they do that with some college. You can get like your associate's degree while you're going to high school. But I don't know of anybody that does trades degrees out of high school. And I could be wrong. I personally have never heard of that. So that's what I felt the Lord told me that was going to happen. But that was going to be 8 to 10 years out. We are hitting our 5-year anniversary right now. So I still got 3 to 5 years for that to kind of develop. Big term plan is we'd love to be in every state, and multiple locations in every state. Really, what's happening right now behind scenes, just to kind of give a little window shot into what my job looks like and what it's going to roll into, because that was the other piece, is I've been working behind scenes on curriculum. So we have activity curriculum, biblical curriculum, and video curriculum that's get tied into an LMS system, so that, let's say, a church in Chicago reaches out and says, Chad, we love an Advanced Camp out here in Chicago. If they called me right now and asked for it, my answer would be no. I don't have the capacity. I don't have the time, and the Lord didn't tell me to go. But give me some time, and I'll have curriculum that you can start your own program with our curriculum, with our teaching, with our video background, all that stuff, and you can go start it, that I don't have to be present for that camp. So those logistics are getting worked out right now, but I needed to be able to be replicable without me. A guy challenged me last December, and said, Chad, what happens to advanced camp if Chad dies? And man, that like threw me back on my heels. I'm like, at this point, it would die too. And that can't happen, because then we stop serving the fatherless. So I felt like my personal direction that I feel like it's been very directly spoke over my life, both by some of the guys I see as spiritual leaders in my life, and just the Lord just kind of speaking to me, is my position is changing to the visionary and the leader. The best way I can explain it to you, instead of being behind the train, pushing the train from the caboose, I'm the one that's supposed to be out laying the track. Like advanced camp's coming, but I got to lay the track so it can be successful. And so big focuses of mine lately have been being that long-term visionary. Okay, what does it look like 3, 5, 10, 20 years down the road? What do we have to build right now for a platform? And what do we need to build for steps to happen easily as we multiply? And so that's where my role's going. So Nathan, to answer that question, that's what I will hate to step away from, that side-by-side mentoring. And trust me, I will still squeeze it in because I love it. It's so close to my heart. But at the same token, like, I have to lay that track out for the advanced camp train to come along and just keep trucking along to make sure it's happening and growing and developing and all those pieces. So my role will be changing probably in my assumption is next 2 to 3 years.
I love that, because this is such an incredible ministry. It's such an incredible opportunity for people to partner with you. Again, if you're listening to this and you want to partner with Chad and what he's doing with Advanced Camp USA, you can actually go to www.advancedcampusa.com, and you can either donate a financial donation, whether that's one-time reoccurring, or if you also want to get involved and see what you can do locally, or even if you want to donate, pretty much they have a lot of things that you could donate that they could be using to be working with these young men. So I really want to thank all of you for joining us, and thank you for watching this episode. It's truly been amazing. Until next time, remember to be more, see more, and experience more than before.